right, you're watching Live Now. I'm Austin Westfall. Let's stick with this Nancy Guthrie story. We are hearing a person is being detained in custody for questioning. Guthrie herself has not been found. Fox News Digital's Michael Ruiz has been all over this. He's sent out a few tweets. Let's just go through some of what we know about this, and then we're going to be checking in with law enforcement expert Jamie Copenhaver momentarily here. So we will bring you a conversation with Jamie shortly here to talk about what this means. Here's what Michael knows so far. He says a law enforcement source tells me they have one person in custody but have not found Nancy Guthrie. So they have not found her. They're questioning this person regarding her disappearance. Michael Ruiz, by the way, is a reporter for Fox News Digital. He's well connected with this story. And by the way, a clarification here. Not arrested, detained. That's how Michael puts it at this time. Unclear to us what the timeline is here, by the way. Not exactly sure, and I don't think I've seen other news outlets report when this detainment happened. And it's unclear to me exactly where they are in the process tonight. Is the questioning taking place as we speak? We will presumably wait to hear more from the Pima County Sheriff's Department as the night progresses, and then maybe early in the morning we'll hear something. In southern Arizona, a live look at the Guthrie home, the time approaching 8 p.m. in the Grand Canyon State. Let's just go through some of what we've learned today about this, because there's been a lot of major developments that have broke. A masked person was seen on these images. The first time we've seen a person. FBI releasing these images saying they have an individual that may be a person of interest. They are phrasing this very carefully, by the way, saying that they have an individual who may have a connection to the disappearance, but obviously we see this masked person with what appears to be a handgun holster walking up to the door. This Google Nest camera capturing this. The FBI saying that they were able to scrape this data despite the data being erased from the proper channels. So this video released today, these images released today. You can see the suspect's eyes. Many of our analysts and experts have been on with us today saying that even though this person is covered up, they basically can get a decent amount of physical attributes. Obviously, the eyes. You might be able to discern the height, the gender. Images from about a little over a week ago, showing some of the blood staining the ground, staining the porch outside of the Guthrie residence. You know, I'm usually able to check in with our experts and analysts before we hit the air, but I just want to bring Jamie Copenhaver in right now. Jamie, we have you and your voice over the phone here. Jamie's a law enforcement expert. I just want to make sure you're connected with me, Jamie.
I am, Austin. Good to be with you.
It's good to be with you. Thanks for coming on. We are getting very preliminary information about a detainment being made. Michael Ruiz with Fox News Digital making sure to distinguish between a person who has not been arrested. It appears that we have a person in custody. They're being questioned. Ruiz says detained, not arrested at this time. Jamie, what are you making of the breaking news tonight?
Certainly shows forward movement in the case that we've all been wanting, right? So great news. What stood out to me, Austin, was this reported $300 transaction of Bitcoin that may have been sent to the kidnappers. And then just a short time later, 3 to 4 hours later, we're seeing a person of interest being detained by the officials and law enforcement. So, you know, I truly think that was connected. And here we go. We have a person of interest detained. And that speaks volumes too.
Are you able to explain the difference between being detained and, well, being detained for questioning, the difference between that and being formally arrested?
Yeah, I mean, if you detain someone against their will, you're taking their freedom, you're taking their movements away. So, you're going to have some type of probable cause to say, hey, we're going to detain you. You're coming with us. It's not, will you come with us? You're detained. You're coming with us. The caveat to that is law enforcement is, they're being very guarded with whatever they release to the public. This person is not named a person of interest. He's not named the suspect. And I think that's just good measurement by law enforcement, making sure they have the dots connected before they officially call anyone a suspect. So keep in mind, just, it may be a person detained, but they're still not free to move, Austin. It wasn't, will you come with us? He's being detained. So that tells me they had enough probable cause, whatever the dots they've connected thus far, to get to where they're at to actually detain and temporarily suspend the movement of that person they have in custody.
Law enforcement expert Jamie Copenhaver joining us. I'm Austin Westfall. This person is being questioned tonight. What legal thresholds typically do authorities need to have in order to bring somebody in for questioning?
It's all going to come down to probable cause. We don't know if there were any type of search warrants that may have been executed on this individual prior to this individual being detained. But rest assured, I mean, you're not going to go out there on a flim-flam tip and detain someone to bring them back to headquarters or whatever office they're going to go and interview this individual. So it's a huge step to get to this. So I'm going to suggest that there's something pointing from law enforcement to this individual. I keep coming back to that $300 purported transaction of Bitcoin. Was that connected? Did that connect a dot in order to get to this part of the investigation to bring a person against their will, basically, into headquarters for questioning? So I think it's a huge forward moment in the investigation, Austin. We just don't know all the details.
The last I saw, TMZ reported that there was activity in the Bitcoin account. TMZ, at least last I checked, was not saying the dollar amount, but a local Tucson affiliate, KGUN, did say that it was under $300 being moved in that Bitcoin account. Not a whole lot more context other than that, though. What do you make of $300? Because, people track movements in Bitcoin accounts. They're probably either curious to know if this is a ransom money amount, or if this could be some sort of test. Sometimes people will put a small amount of money into a Bitcoin account to test to make sure that a transfer works. But $300 to me at least doesn't fit into either of those buckets.
No, it doesn't. And let's preface and make sure the viewers know, we don't know the facts on the monetary amount of that exchange. So, we've heard rumors it was up to $300. So let's be clear on that. That's not factual. That's what we're hearing. In terms of that small amount, it's been purported, Austin, that they wanted around $6 million in ransom for the return of Nancy Guthrie. And then, we're hearing this lowball figure, perhaps under $300 that had been transmitted and exchanged. You hit the nail right on the head. To me, that telegraphs and tells me it was some type of, not so much a test, but perhaps FBI may have planted a Trojan horse somewhere in that transaction that could reveal the location via IP address, and certainly defeat if they're using a VPN.
There's so many directions that we could take this conversation, especially since there's really only preliminary information known about this person that's been brought in for questioning. From your experience, does a detention for questioning signal a major break in a case, or can it simply be routine procedure?
I'm not going to call it routine. I've been on that side of the fence, and you have enough to go question someone. But here's the caveat, and they're key words. A person has been detained. And that's not our words, Austin. That's coming from purportedly law enforcement. So, to me, that signals it wasn't a voluntary, consensual interaction between this person and law enforcement. They went out. We're hearing rumors of a SWAT element in the area prior to that. So that signals and telegraphs to me they had something on the radar and enough probable cause to go out and bring that person in detained to hopefully ask more questions. The key factor is this: is the individual going to freely talk? Is he going to lawyer up? We haven't heard that, right? It's too early, but that's certainly a possibility in the realm of things as well.
I'll read a little bit of reporting from Fox News Digital. They say the FBI's elite hostage rescue team, they call it HRT, is in Tucson. This is the SWAT efforts that you're alluding to. Multiple news outlets have reported this, that HRT is in fact in the area. They are the FBI's premier tactical unit, and they get deployed in high-risk and complex operations. This is the first time I've been on with you since the release of these images, Jamie. What was your reaction to seeing the masked person on this surveillance video?
Absolutely spooky, right? I mean, that was my jaw dropped. I was doing another station live on a Fox station and saw them for the first time, and I was like, oh, it was unbelievable. What that telegraphs to me is the person was certainly prepared, Austin. He had a thick layer, if not multiple layer of clothing on. More importantly, his face was concealed. You know, you can see those two beady eyes illuminated from that Ring door camera. But more importantly, he had his hands covered with what I appear to be multiple layers of some type of maybe plastic or neoprene gloves to prevent any DNA escaping from those fingers and hands. So, you know, not to mention the weapon he was carrying. But here's another telltale sign. The individual appeared to be wearing a backpack. And if you look at that backpack, it appeared to be somewhat full of items. We don't know what, we can speculate what items, but he certainly was prepared, in my opinion, for the heinous crimes that he was getting ready to commit.
You know, we're looking at the video right now. At one point, the person uses a plant to try and obscure the view of the camera. And you're right. A lot of people are making the point that you can see the eyes clearly. Of course, much of this person is covered. You can't see a whole lot. But what can you discern from somebody that's covered up like this? What physical attributes can you gain from something?
You know, the digital team at the FBI is going to go and take that image and those still images and video, and they're going to import that, if you will, in some tools that they have. They're going to be able to determine almost to the centimeter of how tall this individual is, his weight. Given the fact that he's wearing multiple layers of clothes, I'm pretty sure the tools can detect that clothing and give an approximate weight. More importantly, you know, to the average person looking at this, you only see the two eyeballs, right? But there is some software, some tools that they can perhaps enhance that and perhaps give a facial structure based on what they see of the bridge of the nose through the mask, and also the width of the eyes that we can see clearly. So I am 100% confident that the digital team at FBI is all over this, and I think we'll see some considerable headway and announcements coming very soon from FBI and local law enforcement on the identity of the suspect.
It was reported today that investigators were taking swabs from people who work at the home, people like landscapers, pool cleaners, things of that nature. If they're doing things like that, does that tell us that there's a chance or a likelihood that they have unidentified DNA that they've been able to take from the crime scene?
You know, it would speak both ways, Austin. And what I'd want to believe is, you know, on any of these cases, unfortunately, you're going to look at family, you're going to look at close associates, and you're certainly going to look at service providers such as gardeners, pool people, et cetera. But what you want to do is take DNA swabs of all of the above, right? And what you're looking to do is clear people from the pool of suspects or persons that they suspect. So, you know, don't look at that DNA swabbing of those service people as a guilt. They're perhaps looking to clear those people to get them out of the way so they can move forward looking for the real intruder in this case.
Yeah, I guess that was the point I was trying to make. Not so much on the people that are being swabbed, but if they're taking DNA from people in and around the house, does that mean that they're trying to eliminate people because they have found unidentified DNA somewhere around or in the residence?
Absolutely. All of the above. You don't know who's responsible. This is a unsub, right? So you have to do exactly what we're seeing play out to not only clear people, but you may get a hit on someone that you're taking a DNA swab or a sample from. Equally as important, I mean, we've seen crime scene and FBI agents back out at Nancy Guthrie's house on multiple trips. So, you know, we don't know exactly what those trips are about, but we know that photographs were taken purportedly in the garage and other rooms of that house. So, you know, they're just making sure they don't leave anything behind in terms of anything potential as far as DNA or any other science. I don't read a lot into the Annie Guthrie house a lot. It's trending that they were there multiple times. Um, Perhaps they're looking for additional DNA items to clear everyone that had contact with Nancy that day from the family aspect. So it's so fluid in motion, and unfortunately, it's unforgiving. But the FBI has to do what they're doing in order to move the case forward to make an arrest.
It was reported that authorities were going door to door in the Guthrie neighborhood today. Some of the people in the newsroom had this question. I'm assuming many people at home might have this question. Wouldn't they have already done door-to-door knocking earlier on in the investigation? We're almost a week and a half into this thing at this point. What more could they be doing going door to door?
They could be looking for any cameras that may have been in a car or a vehicle. People may have not been home during that original canvass. More importantly, maybe they have connected a dot that led them back to that neighborhood, and perhaps, and I'm speculating, Austin, maybe something happened previous to the kidnapping of Nancy Guthrie, and they're trying to see if there are any cars in the neighborhood that may have matched up with possibly an eyewitness, right? That may have seen a car in the area of Nancy Guthrie leading up to her kidnapping. There's just so much speculation as to why they've been out there multiple times. As you guys reported yesterday, they were sifting and digging around in manhole covers. So I truly want to believe, and I have 100% confidence in the FBI, they're literally leaving no stone unturned, and they're making multiple trips to make sure that all the dots are connected and they're not missing anything on these canvases of the neighborhood.
Yeah, we had the drone above the house on Sunday. These images are from Sunday, but we've been seeing, this type of activity has been happening basically every day since Guthrie disappeared. Jamie, given what we've seen so far, these new images being released, we've now seen the passing of 2 reported ransom deadlines. There's been a reward announced. An imposter was arrested, among other things. What's the biggest misconception that you think the public has about how cases like this actually get solved?
Great question, Austin. We all sit back and watch these crime shows while eating dinner or having popcorn or what have you. And these crime shows, the crime gets solved in 45 minutes minus the commercials. And it's not real life. It doesn't happen that way. It takes time to build the evidence in a case. And we're seeing this play out. We're all on the edges of our seat. We all want Nancy returned, but unfortunately, it takes time to build a case. They have DNA and biological and other samples that are perhaps pending at the lab level that haven't came back yet. So, law enforcement, in my opinion, I think they're being very, very measured in terms of what they're releasing to the public versus what they're not releasing, because you don't want to speed up law enforcement and they miss something by pressure. So I think they're being very measured in terms of keeping stuff from us as much as they are giving us little bits and pieces. So, my hat's off to the sheriff out there. I think he's done an amazing job. He himself said he released the crime scene a little bit too early. But let me tell you something. The sheriff owned that and said if he had it to do over, he wouldn't have done that. So, we must, as the public, assist law enforcement, but we also need to give them some credit as this case progresses.
We here at LiveNOW and so many other news outlets have had this phone number on their screen for the majority of the week and longer than a week at this point. 1-800-CALL-FBI, that's the tip line. You got to imagine a ton of information is coming into that tip line. How do authorities typically sift through what's helpful and what's not helpful if they have a large amount of data coming their way?
And they do. You're right on point. It's been suggested that they're getting between 75 and 85,000 tips per day. And, the painstaking misery of not only personnel from FBI, but the help of software. You have to vet and go through every single one of those tips, because guess what? If you miss one, Austin, or if you kind of like, okay, well, this maybe not, it doesn't mean anything, it doesn't make sense, and you throw that tip aside, Austin, that could be the tip that breaks the entire case. So, it's painstaking. I always like to give credit to the analysts that are there in Quantico and other hidden places going through these tips tirelessly. They don't get the credit, right? But they're solving a lot of these crimes. And, the tips are so valuable to any case. And as this, as this plays out, I can assure you there are going to be tips that came in to that 800 FBI number that helped law enforcement connect the dots. The billboards that are going up are amazing, but you have to have the personnel to filter through every one of those tips that come in. And, a lot of them can be debunked and set aside, but unfortunately, you have to go through and read and go through every tip. Here's the other caveat to that. Once that tip is triaged and deemed to be credible as a real tip, then you're going to have to send a law enforcement officer out to the area where that tip originated from to make contact, if the availability is there, with the tipster to learn more information. So it's a fluid, I call it organized chaos. But the FBI is well versed on how to do this, and we're seeing it play out before our eyes on what they're capable of doing. And it's simply amazing, I think.
The Guthrie home, live on our screen right now, just past 8:15 Mountain Standard Time in Arizona. For those just tuning in, this is the news of the night. We're getting breaking news from Fox News Digital saying that they have detained one person for questioning in relation to the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie. Michael Ruiz making the point that this is not an arrest. This is a detainment and a questioning at this time, and Guthrie herself has not been found. Two sources telling Fox News Digital that a person has been detained for questioning in connection to the disappearance. That's all we know for now. Fox News confirming the very same thing. Jamie, before we let you go here, what are the most important things you're listening for, you're watching for in the next 24 to 48 hours?
What I want to see, Austin, is a presser held by the sheriff and the FBI. They're going to have some type of momentum, forward movement on this case as they progress with this person of interest or the detainee, right? So I will be looking for a press conference, hopefully sometime tomorrow, to let us know what those results yielded in terms of this person they're detaining currently. The bigger question is, are they going to release any type of sketches of this mystery man wearing the mask at Nancy Guthrie's front door? We know that they potentially have the tools to come up with a sketch. I would be looking for that in the next day also, if they don't solve it with the person they have detained.
Jamie, can't thank you enough for the time tonight. Jamie Copenhaver is a former sheriff's detective and investigator. He's also a law enforcement expert. Thanks.